A drunken confession, a secret revealed, and a laughter that breaks a bond. Taehyung exposes Jungkook's hidden shame, but it's Jimin's reaction that cuts deepest. You're seriously going to tell that story now, Taehyung? In front of him. The tension in the penthouse cracked like a fault line moments before an earthquake. A wine glass tipped. Red soaked into the plush white carpet like a slow-motion wound. Jungkook stood frozen, shoulders tight, lips parted slightly in disbelief. He had come to the gathering thinking it would be a quiet night among friends, laughter, music, maybe even a song or two if Yoongi brought out the guitar. Not this. Not this. Taehyung leaned back against the velvet couch, one hand lazily twirling the stem of his glass, the other gesturing in a half-mocking, half-playful arc. His eyes sparkled, not cruelly, not intentionally, just with that dangerous kind of honesty that slips through when wine takes hold of the tongue. You guys remember that time in Busan, right? When Jungkook got so wasted he started confessing his undying love to a mannequin. The room went still. Jimin blinked, mouth opening like he was about to scold Taehyung. But then, just as quickly, he burst out laughing sharp, uncontrolled, and a little too loud. Laughter bounced off the high-rise windows. Hobie tried to chuckle along, Namjoon cleared his throat with discomfort, and Seokjin raised an eyebrow, sipping his drink without a word. Jungkook didn't move. The air around him grew heavy, thick with shame. His ears burned. The memory wasn't funny to him, not anymore. Not after what that night had really meant. Not after the things he'd said to the mannequin had been echoes of feelings he couldn't admit in real life. He stared at Jimin. Jimin, who once held him through a panic attack. Jimin, who knew how hard it was for him to trust. Jimin, who, without knowing, was the very person that drunken Jungkook had been trying to talk to that night in Busan. It wasn't about the mannequin. It never had been. It was about the truth Jungkook couldn't say. And now it was a joke. A cold, echoing laugh in a room where he had once felt safe. I wasn't just drunk, Jungkook said quietly, barely more than a whisper. You think that was funny, but it was real. It was the only way I could say it. The laughter stopped. Taehyung's expression shifted first, eyes widening in sober realization, wine glass lowering to the table. Jimin's face twisted in confusion, still caught halfway between amusement and dawning regret. What are you saying? Jimin asked, his voice unsteady now. I was trying to tell you, Jungkook said. His chest rose and fell, tight with emotion. That night, the mannequin, the things I said, it wasn't a joke. I just didn't have the guts to say it to your face. Silence fell, thick as fog. Only the hum of the city lights outside dared to speak. For a moment, no one knew what to do. Taehyung looked like he wanted to vanish into the couch. Jimin stared at Jungkook, as if seeing him for the first time, as if the pieces of a puzzle were finally clicking into place, but the image it formed was terrifying. Then Jungkook turned and walked out, silent, slow, purposeful. The click of the door was louder than any shout. Behind him, hearts raced with the aftershock of a truth that had been hidden too long. Don't just sit there. Someone go after him. Taehyung's voice cracked with a mix of guilt and urgency, the kind that came too late, always too late. But no one moved. Not even Jimin. The living room, moments ago alive with the buzz of music and murmurs, now felt like the aftermath of a car crash, still, surreal, and filled with the ringing echo of what had just happened. Jungkook was gone. Really gone. Taehyung stood slowly, almost as if unsure his body would hold him up, and then he dropped the glass onto the table with a loud clink. It didn't break, but it might as well have. His jaw clenched as he stared at the closed front door, chest heaving from more than just alcohol. I was just joking, he muttered, but even he didn't believe that. It was just a stupid story. Jimin didn't say anything. He hadn't moved since Jungkook left. His fingers were locked together, knuckles white, breath shallow. Something in his eyes looked fractured, as though a truth he hadn't been ready to see had finally been shoved under a spotlight, and it was uglier than he ever imagined. Yoongi stood now, brushing crumbs from his lap. He'll be back. No, Jimin whispered. He won't. Heads turned. The words were quiet, almost lost, but heavy with finality. It was the tone that made everyone pause. Jimin finally looked up, eyes meeting Taehyung's. You humiliated him. Taehyung recoiled like he'd been slapped. I didn't mean to, he never told me it was real. How the hell was I supposed to know? You didn't need to know. You should have just respected his silence. Jesus, Jimin, don't turn this on me. You laughed. That stopped him. The words hung between them like a blade. Sharp. Honest. Bloody. Jimin's face twitched. He stood abruptly, chair scraping against the marble floor. I didn't know. I swear I didn't. I thought it was one of those dumb things he does when he's drunk. Like the time he tried to freestyle rap about banana milk. But it wasn't, Namjoon said carefully, eyes scanning the group like a quiet mediator forced into the role. This time, it meant something. Everyone was quiet again. Outside, thunder rumbled. Late summer rain streaked the windows like tears the sky itself couldn't hold back. Jungkook didn't know how far he'd walked. The air outside was hot and sticky, clinging to his skin like regret. He wandered the back streets of Seoul with his hoodie pulled low over his head, trying to disappear into the shadows. But the shame clung tighter than the heat. Why had Taehyung said that? And why had Jimin laughed? It wasn't just embarrassment. It wasn't just heartbreak. It was betrayal, sharp and cold and breath-stealing. He had loved Jimin for years in the quiet, secret corners of his heart. He had whispered those words to the mannequin because he was too afraid of rejection, too afraid to lose what little intimacy they already had. Friendship was the only way he could have Jimin. He had convinced himself that it was enough. But now the whole room knew. Not the way he wanted them to. Not with tenderness. Not with trust. But through laughter. Laughter. Jungkook ducked into a closed convenience store's awning, trying to shield himself from the rain. His hands shook as he fumbled for his phone, debating whether to block everyone or just throw the damn thing in the gutter. He didn't want to see their texts. He didn't want apologies. He wanted the moment back. He wanted to not have felt Jimin laugh. Damn it, he muttered, kicking the pavement. Behind him, a voice spoke. Low. Careful. Jungkook. He turned fast, defensive, expecting Taehyung. Or maybe Namjoon. But it was Jimin. Hair soaked, chest heaving, eyes wide, not with pity, but something else. Something raw. Unfiltered. I followed you, Jimin said, stepping into the glow of the streetlight. Jungkook stepped back. Don't. I need to say something. No, you don't, Jungkook snapped, voice shaking now. You said enough with that laugh. I didn't know what it meant. Jimin shouted back. The rain didn't stop either of them. I didn't know what it meant, Jungkook. How was I supposed to know you meant it for me? There. It was out. Both of them froze. Jimin took another step forward, water streaming down his face and jacket. You could have told me. I did, Jungkook said bitterly. But I had to dress it up as a joke. As a drunken moment. Because I knew you'd never. Never what? Jimin interrupted, his voice breaking. Never feel the same? Jungkook faltered. I didn't laugh because I thought it was pathetic, Jimin continued. I laughed because I panicked. I didn't know how to handle it. You don't just drop something like that in front of a room full of people, especially not me. I thought you were drunk and being stupid, like always. And then I saw your face. The silence between them was louder than thunder. Jungkook swallowed. You still didn't stop laughing. I know. Jimin's voice cracked. I hate myself for it. Jungkook didn't answer. He didn't want to forgive him. Not yet. Maybe not ever. He turned to leave again. Then Jimin said, almost too quietly, you weren't the only one drunk in Busan. That stopped him. What? That night, Jimin whispered. I wasn't sober either. And I remember everything. Every word you said. I just didn't have the guts to ask you if it was real. Slowly, Jungkook turned back around. Their eyes locked under the streetlight, rain falling all around them like a curtain pulled back from some hidden truth. I thought you were joking, Jimin admitted. Because if it was real, it meant I had to answer. And I didn't know what my answer was. And now? Jungkook asked, voice hollow. Jimin stepped closer. Now? I don't know either. But I want to find out. Lightning flashed in the distance. The space between them was no longer empty. It was electric. Fragile. Real. Jungkook looked down, teeth sinking into his bottom lip. I don't want to be your experiment, Jimin. You're not, Jimin said firmly. You never were. They stood in silence again. Neither moved. But something had shifted, something deep and invisible, like tectonic plates under the ocean. Then Jungkook shook his head slowly. I need time. I'll wait, Jimin whispered. As long as you need. Back in the penthouse, Taehyung stared at his own reflection in the darkened window, the city lights behind him bleeding through the glass. You fucked up, Yoongi said bluntly, standing at the minibar. I know, Taehyung whispered. No, I mean really fucked up. That wasn't just a story. That was a confession. You turned his vulnerability into a goddamn party trick. I didn't know it was about Jimin. It doesn't matter, Yoongi said coldly. You knew it mattered. You felt it. You're not that stupid. Taehyung exhaled hard, fingers trembling. Then he reached for his phone and typed a message. To Jungkook. I'm sorry. I don't know what else to say yet. But I'm really, truly sorry. He didn't hit send. He stared at the screen for a long time, then quietly locked the phone and shoved it into his pocket. This wasn't something a text could fix. And deep down, he knew the damage might already be irreversible. But the story wasn't over yet. Because somewhere deep in Jungkook's heart, something had cracked open, and not all cracks were meant to be sealed shut. Some were doors. And someone had finally knocked. Say it again, Jungkook hissed, pressing Jimin against the cold concrete wall of the hallway in their shared apartment building. Rainwater still dripped from both their jackets, forming small puddles on the floor, but neither noticed. The heat between them cut through the chill of the night, fury and desperation thrumming like static in the air. I said I don't want to be afraid anymore, Jimin replied, breath catching against Jungkook's proximity. I'm tired of pretending. Jungkook's jaw clenched so tightly it ached. You don't get to say that now. Not after you laughed. I didn't laugh at you, Jimin growled, voice rougher than usual. I laughed because I was scared. You think you're the only one who felt something that night in Busan? You think I didn't notice how your hands shook when you said I love you to that mannequin? You think I didn't hear the way your voice cracked? You didn't say anything, Jungkook snapped. You acted like it meant nothing. Because I didn't know what to do. Jimin shouted. I've been trying to figure it out ever since, Jungkook, but you never brought it up again. So I thought maybe it was just one of those things. I thought maybe you regretted it. I never regretted it. Jungkook's voice dropped to a whisper, hoarse with unshed emotion. I regretted not saying it to you. Their breaths collided. Time held its breath. But before anything else could be said, a door down the hall creaked open. Are you two fighting again? Seokjin's voice cut through the moment, his sleepy face peeking through the crack of his door, clearly annoyed. It's 3 a.m. Some of us aren't in the middle of a dramatic coming-of-age romance, you know. Jungkook immediately stepped back. Jimin ran a hand through his damp hair and turned away. Sorry, Hyung, Jungkook muttered. Whatever, Seokjin yawned. Try not to kill each other before sunrise. The door shut again. Silence. Jungkook didn't look at Jimin. Instead, he turned and walked toward their apartment door. We'll talk in the morning. You mean if you don't run again? Jimin called after him. Jungkook froze. He turned halfway, just enough to show the tension in his shoulders, the tremble in his hands. I didn't run. I escaped. And then he was gone inside, the door clicking shut behind him. At noon, sunlight spilled over Seoul like gold over broken glass. The city glittered, unaware of the cracks hidden in its tallest towers and the hearts of the people within them. Taehyung sat in the studio, headphones around his neck, a beat looping endlessly in the background. But he wasn't listening to it. His gaze was fixed on his phone screen. No reply. Jungkook had read the message 2 hours ago. The red receipt burned more than any curse could. Yoongi entered silently, carrying coffee for both of them. He placed one cup next to Taehyung without saying anything, then sat down across from him. You know you're going to have to face him eventually. Taehyung took the coffee but didn't drink. I know. I mean really face him. No jokes. No deflection. You crossed a line. Do you think I broke them? Yoongi didn't answer right away. He tapped a few keys on the soundboard, adjusting the volume of the loop, then leaned back. You cracked something. Whether it breaks or heals, that's up to them. But yeah, you messed up. Taehyung nodded slowly. I keep thinking about the way he looked at me before he walked out. Like I'd taken something from him. You did, Yoongi said bluntly. His control. His dignity. Maybe even his trust. Do you think Jimin forgives me? I think Jimin's too busy trying to forgive himself right now. The studio fell into a heavy silence again. The beat looped. Coffee went cold. Taehyung finally pulled out his phone again, opened his contacts, and hit call. It rang once. Twice. 3 times. Then, hello. It wasn't Jungkook. It was Jimin. Taehyung nearly ended the call out of instinct. Jimin, he said carefully, voice low. Where's Jungkook? Sleeping. Or pretending to. Can I talk to you then? Jimin was silent on the other end for a moment. Then he said, I'm listening. Taehyung closed his eyes. I'm sorry. I know. No, I mean really sorry. Not just the kind where I feel bad and move on. The kind where I think about it every 5 minutes and want to take it back so badly I can't breathe. Jimin exhaled. I know that kind too well lately. I thought it was funny. And I didn't even stop to think if it should be. I thought I was being charming. You know how I am. But that story. I never realized how much it meant to him. Not until I saw his face after you laughed. Jimin's voice cracked slightly. I laughed because I was terrified. I get it now, Taehyung whispered. But I still hurt him. You did, Jimin said. But I did worse. Maybe, Taehyung murmured. Or maybe you both just let fear talk louder than your hearts. There was silence again. Then Jimin said softly, he loves me, Tae. I know. And I don't know if I deserve it. You don't have to deserve it. Just honor it. That night, the group met again, this time not at a party, not at a penthouse filled with noise, but in the dim quiet of the studio lounge. Jungkook came because Namjoon asked. Taehyung came because he had to. Jimin came because he couldn't stay away. The tension in the room was a living thing. It breathed between them, pressed down on their shoulders, sat heavy on their tongues. Taehyung was the first to speak. I was an idiot, he said simply. And I can't ask you to forgive me yet, but I needed you to hear me say it to your face. Jungkook said nothing. He didn't even look at him. I turned your pain into a performance. I didn't mean to, but I did. And I will never do it again. Still no reply. Jimin reached for Jungkook's hand. This time, Jungkook didn't pull away. Yoongi leaned forward in his seat. You're all carrying something heavy. You've been avoiding talking about it for months. Maybe even years. We're idols, Seokjin muttered. Avoidance is our default setting. But you're also people, Namjoon added. You can't just keep bottling everything up and expecting not to explode. Taehyung looked at Jungkook then. You don't have to accept my apology now. I just needed you to know that what you felt that night in Busan, it mattered. To all of us. But especially to me. Jungkook finally looked up. His eyes were red but clear. I believed you were my brother, he said, voice quiet. And you made me feel like a joke. Taehyung swallowed. I know. Don't do it again. I won't. Jungkook nodded. Then we're not okay, but we're not done either. That was as much of a truce as anyone could ask for. Later that night, Jimin followed Jungkook to the rooftop of the building. The city stretched beneath them, lights flickering like galaxies. The wind tugged at their clothes, but neither moved. I don't want to lose you, Jimin said. Jungkook didn't answer immediately. Then, softly, you already have a piece of me. Whether I like it or not. Jimin stepped closer. Then let me take care of it. The kiss was not a fairy tale one. It wasn't perfect or dramatic or choreographed by fate. It was tentative, trembling, full of questions. But it was real. And for the first time in a long while, that was enough. Even broken glass, under the right light, can still shine. The lights on the stage flickered blue, then red, then white, like the rhythm of a heartbeat too fast, too anxious. It was rehearsal day at the Olympic Gymnastics Arena, and the group was supposed to be preparing for one of their biggest performances of the year. The stadium echoed with distant footsteps and clipped commands from crew members. A tech assistant yelled something unintelligible across the room, a speaker crackled with static, and someone dropped a mic stand with a loud crash that made Jimin flinch. Jungkook didn't. He stood center stage, staring into the vast empty seats like they were judging him already. Like they knew. His heart wasn't in the choreography. His feet moved, his voice held pitch, but his soul was somewhere else, locked in that rooftop moment days ago, in the hesitant press of Jimin's lips against his, in the warmth that had followed and the silence that came after. It wasn't that they hadn't spoken since. They had. Brief words. Careful smiles. A shared coffee, awkward in its normalcy. But something was wrong, and Jungkook felt it deep in his chest, a tension that hadn't left, a truth that hadn't been spoken yet. Not fully. Jungkook, again from the chorus, the choreographer barked. He nodded, took position, and tried to silence the noise in his head. From the side of the stage, Taehyung watched, arms crossed, face unreadable. Later, in the green room, the tension exploded. "You're off today," Taehyung said plainly, tossing a bottle of water toward Jungkook. It bounced off his knee and rolled under the bench. Jungkook didn't look up from his phone. "Thanks for the observation." Taehyung raised an eyebrow. "You want to say that again?" Jungkook finally looked at him. "What do you want from me, Hyung? I want the real you to show up again. I want to know if you're okay. I want to know if you're going to break mid-performance and leave the rest of us to cover for you." Jungkook stood so fast the bench scraped across the floor. "Don't pretend you care for us now, Taehyung. You didn't care when you turned my trauma into a party anecdote." The room went silent. Jimin, who'd been lacing his shoes in the corner, froze. Yoongi looked up from his laptop. Even Namjoon stopped scribbling lyrics in his notebook. Taehyung stepped forward, voice low. "I do care. And I'm trying, Jungkook. But you don't get to use what I did as an excuse to shut down and become a damn ghost." Jungkook laughed bitterly. "You think this is about you? I think you want it to be about me. Because it's easier than dealing with the real problem." "Which is what?" Taehyung looked at Jimin. Everyone followed his gaze. Jimin stood slowly, his expression taut. "You're both assholes," he said quietly. "But only one of you is still bleeding." The words landed with the weight of a knife. Jungkook looked at him. "Then say it. Whatever it is you're holding back. Just say it." Jimin swallowed. "You kissed me. And I kissed you back. And I haven't stopped thinking about it since." Jungkook took a shaky breath. "Then why do I feel like you regret it?" "Because I don't know what to do with it," Jimin admitted. "Because I spent so long building walls that now I don't know how to tear them down without cutting both of us in the process." "That's not my problem anymore," Jungkook snapped. "I gave you everything. You gave me confusion. I gave you what I had," Jimin said, louder now. "You're not the only one scared out of his fucking mind." Silence again. Taehyung looked between them, then left the room. Yoongi followed him, mumbling something about needing air. Namjoon stayed, but even he looked like he wanted to disappear into his notebook. "I don't want to fight you," Jimin said, voice softer. Jungkook looked at him, jaw clenched. "Then stop making me feel like I have to choose between loving you and saving myself." Jimin's breath caught. "You think this is easy for me?" he asked, almost whispering. "I've been your best friend for years. I've watched you become everything fearless, brilliant, broken. And he faltered. "I don't want to lose that. I don't want to lose you. But I don't know how to love you without risking everything." "You don't have to," Jungkook said, turning away. "I already did." That night, the group gathered for a scheduled live stream with fans. Smiles were painted on. Questions were answered. Laughter echoed, too loud, too forced. Fans didn't know what was simmering beneath the surface. They didn't know how Jimin's smile twitched every time Jungkook's name was mentioned. They didn't notice the slight tremble in Jungkook's fingers as he poured a drink, or the way Taehyung kept glancing toward them, his expression unreadable. When it was over, the silence returned thicker than ever. Yoongi sat next to Jungkook in the van. "You're burning out." "I'm fine," Jungkook muttered. "No, you're not. You're bleeding all over everyone and calling it rehearsal." Jungkook didn't reply. Yoongi sighed. "You're allowed to be angry. But you're not allowed to self-destruct and expect everyone else to pick up the pieces." "I'm not destroying anything," Jungkook said tightly. "I'm just done hoping people will choose me." Yoongi looked at him for a long moment, then said, "He already did. You're just too hurt to see it." The next day brought another blow. Dispatch released a headline. "Secret romance?" Fans speculate after Jimin and Jungkook seen alone on rooftop at 2 a.m. The photos weren't clear shadows, silhouettes, the blur of city lights behind two figures too close to be casual. But the fandom ignited. Rumors exploded. Comment sections burned. Management called an emergency meeting. They were told to deny everything. To play dumb. To pretend. To protect the brand. Jimin stared at the contract revision in front of him, fingers trembling. Say nothing, the manager repeated. You'll deny it if asked. We'll put out a statement about team bonding. Late-night creative brainstorming. Whatever works. Jungkook stood up. No. Everyone turned to him. No more pretending, he said. No more silence. I'm done living like my truth is a liability. Jungkook, the manager warned. But Jimin stood too. He's right. Taehyung leaned forward. This is career suicide. Yoongi shook his head. No. It's liberation. Namjoon didn't speak. But his nod was slow. Deliberate. Fine, the manager said coldly. Then you'll handle the fallout yourselves. They left the room one by one. Jungkook and Jimin stayed behind. I don't know where this goes, Jimin said, looking down. Neither do I, Jungkook replied. But I want to find out, Jimin whispered. Jungkook stepped closer. And this time, when their lips met, it wasn't tentative. It wasn't trembling. It was defiant. Full of fire. The spotlight had found them. But they were no longer hiding. Even if the world turned against them, they had each other. And for now, just for now, that was enough. The hallway outside HYB's executive conference room was filled with a silence that didn't just settle, it smothered. Every time a door creaked or a shoe clicked against the marble, it felt like a trigger waiting to snap. Jungkook sat on the leather bench with his head leaned back against the wall, his eyes closed but his mind racing. He could still taste Jimin's lips from the kiss in the PR room the night before. It had been worth it, every second of it, but now, in the morning's cold light, all he could feel was the weight of consequence pulling at him. The building was too quiet. Like the world had stepped back, breath held, waiting to see if they'd crumble. Jimin sat beside him, back straight, leg bouncing restlessly. Do you think they'll really suspend us? He asked under his breath. Jungkook didn't open his eyes. I think they'll try to control the narrative first. If that fails, yeah. I think they'll silence us. Jimin exhaled hard. I can't go back to lying. Then don't. Easy for you to say, Jimin muttered. You've always been braver. Jungkook opened his eyes, turning his head slowly. No. I've always just had less to lose. The door opened. Their manager peeked out, looking tired, older than usual. They're ready. They stood. Inside, the air was even heavier. The boardroom was all glass and stone, too clean, too cold. A place built for control, not for confessions. A semicircle of executives sat before them, each one a contradiction of polite expressions and quiet fury. Mr. Han, the director of Global Brand Affairs, gestured to the chairs in front of the long table. Have a seat. They obeyed. For the sake of clarity, Han began, we're not here to debate your personal choices. We're here to assess the impact of those choices. Jungkook tilted his head slightly. Impact on who? Han's jaw twitched. On your brand. On the group's integrity. On the company's stakeholders. And on the millions of fans who've built their identities around your image. Jimin bristled. So, not on us then. Another executive spoke, Miss Choi, head of public relations. You know how delicate this is. We're not against your feelings. But timing, discretion, and strategy matter. Jungkook leaned forward, fingers laced together. What exactly are you asking us to do? Han tapped his pen against the table. Deny the romantic implication. Frame it as misinterpreted closeness. Say nothing further publicly. Focus on the tour. And if we don't? Jimin asked. There was a pause. It was the kind of silence people used when they didn't want to say something, but would if forced. Miss Choi adjusted her glasses. Then we reassess your contracts. Jimin blinked. Jungkook laughed once. It was humorless. You'd fire us? Not fire, Han said smoothly. Redirect. A temporary hiatus. Limited press. Solo ventures. A controlled cooling-off period until things settle. A controlled exile, Jungkook corrected. No one responded. Jimin turned toward Jungkook, eyes searching his. I won't lie again. I won't let you, Jungkook said. Han sighed. Think about the others. Your choices don't just affect you. They affect Taehyung, Yoongi, Hoseok, Jin, Namjoon. They're not pawns, Jimin said. And I'm not a liability. Then prove it, Han said. Prove you can manage this like professionals. In the elevator, the silence between them was different. It was shared, exhausted, unified. I want to disappear, Jimin said quietly, forehead resting against the cool metal wall. Jungkook looked at him, the ache in his chest deeper now. Do you regret it? No, Jimin said. I regret waiting this long. They didn't speak again until they were in the garage. Yoongi was waiting beside his car, arms folded. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't have to. Get in, he said. You both look like death warmed over. They drove in silence for 20 minutes. Jungkook sat in the front seat. Jimin curled up in the back. Seoul passed outside like a blur of color and noise, none of it sinking in. Yoongi finally spoke as they crossed the Han River. You know, when I told you to stop bottling it up, I didn't mean exploded across national media. Jungkook smiled faintly. You're welcome. Yoongi glanced at him. How bad was it? They want us quiet, Jimin said from the back. Or gone. Yoongi sighed. Figures. The truth never fits the script they write for us. They said our truth hurts the group, Jungkook muttered. Bullshit, Yoongi snapped. You being honest is the only thing keeping any of us sane. The car stopped in front of the dorms. They sat there for a moment, unmoving. Then Yoongi said, you know there's no turning back now. We're not trying to, Jungkook said. Yoongi nodded. Good. Then fight smart. That night, Taehyung showed up at Jungkook's apartment. He didn't knock. He used his key. Jungkook was on the couch, headphones on, staring at nothing. Taehyung pulled them off without a word and sat down across from him. You've started a war. Jungkook looked at him. I didn't mean to, but I'm not sorry. Taehyung nodded slowly. Good. Because neither am I. Jungkook blinked. Wait, what? Taehyung reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. He turned the screen to Jungkook. On it was a draft post, a picture of the group backstage, arms wrapped around one another, sweat glistening, smiles unguarded, and a caption that read, no matter what they say, we choose each other. Always. You're going to post that? Jungkook asked. I already did. He refreshed the screen. 30,000 likes in 4 minutes. Hundreds of comments. Some support. Some outrage. But all of it real. You didn't have to do that, Jungkook said, stunned. Taehyung stood. You're my brother. You messed up. I messed up. But this industry doesn't get to erase you for loving out loud. Jungkook stared at him. Why no? Because I finally realized something, Taehyung said, voice softening. Love is not the scandal. Silence is. The next 48 hours were chaos. News outlets speculated wildly. Fans divided sharply. Hashtags trended globally. Some in support. Some filled with vitriol. Hashtag protect Jimin. Hashtag we stand with Jungkook. Hashtag disband BTS trended briefly, then was flooded with fan defenses, countering hate with solidarity. Within the company, meetings were endless. But the group was unified. Even Jeon, dialing in from military service, said on the phone, let them try. We'll outlive their panic. 1 week later, they stepped onto the stage in Osaka. It was the first show since the photos. The air was electric. Heavy with expectation. Jimin's mic trembled in his hand. Jungkook took his spot beside him. Before the music started, Namjoon stepped forward and addressed the crowd. In the past week, a lot's been said about us. About our relationships. About who we're allowed to be. But we want you to know, we're not here to be perfect. We're here to be true. Silence. Then cheers. Screams. Tears. The lights rose. The music began. And for the first time, Jungkook sang without hiding. Jimin danced without fear. They met in the center of the stage during the bridge of Euphoria, their hands brushing brief, deliberate. The crowd saw. And roared. The spotlight wasn't kind. But it wasn't deadly either. Because this time, it didn't burn. It revealed. The flight back from Osaka was quiet, but not peaceful. In the first-class cabin, the boys occupied their usual seats, spread out and silent, each one trapped in their own mind. The success of the concert was undeniable. The crowd had been louder than ever, the energy raw, the love overwhelming. But behind the performance, something else was building, something darker. Taehyung sat by the window, sunglasses on even though the cabin lights were dimmed. He hadn't spoken to anyone since they'd boarded. The moment the plane took off, he had pulled up the article on his phone again, reading the words over and over like a wound he couldn't stop poking. Private behavior, public consequences, idol group's internal rift goes global. It wasn't just the media anymore. An anonymous leak from inside the company had triggered a wave of speculation, naming Taehyung as the disgruntled member who allegedly opposed Jungkook and Jimin's relationship from the beginning. The article was venomous, crafted to divide. And worst of all, it had teeth. The claims were layered with lies, but buried in enough fragments of truth that the public was biting. Jungkook sat across the aisle, jaw tight, scrolling through hate comments, hate tweets, hateful edits. Jimin had tried to take his phone earlier, but Jungkook had pulled it back so hard his knuckles had turned white. Jimin now sat 2 rows behind, separated deliberately. His eyes were open, but unfocused. No one slept. And when the plane landed in Seoul, the terminal was a war zone. Hundreds of fans had gathered. Not for love. For judgment. Signs. Screaming. Chanting. Security pushed a wall of bodies back, but the noise still broke through. Jungkook caught sight of one sign just before being shoved into a black van. "Keep your filth out of Bangtan." His blood boiled. The van door slammed shut behind them. Taehyung was next to him. Jimin was up front with Namjoon. Yoongi and Hoseok had taken a separate vehicle. The tension between Jungkook and Taehyung was impossible to ignore. "You saw the article," Jungkook said suddenly. Taehyung didn't answer. "They're blaming you." Still silence. Jungkook turned toward him, his voice low and sharp. "They think you're the one trying to break us apart." Taehyung pulled off his sunglasses. His eyes were bloodshot, but his gaze was hard. "Do you think I leaked it?" Jungkook didn't answer right away. Taehyung scoffed. "Unbelievable." "I didn't say yes." "You didn't have to." Jungkook rubbed his face with both hands. "You've been distant. Weird. Cold. Ever since Osaka." Taehyung leaned in, voice venomous. "Maybe because I'm trying to process watching the 2 people I thought I knew best kiss on stage, like we hadn't spent years agreeing to keep our personal shit out of performances." "We weren't performing," Jungkook snapped. "That wasn't a move. That was the truth. And truth has consequences." Taehyung hissed. "You think just because you're brave enough to kiss him in front of 50,000 people, the rest of us don't have to live with the fallout?" The van stopped at a red light. The silence that followed was thick with unsaid things. Then Taehyung muttered, "Maybe you don't even care if we get destroyed, as long as he keeps choosing you." Jungkook turned toward him fully. "What the hell does that mean?" "Forget it," Taehyung said, looking out the window. "No, say it." Taehyung turned back, fire in his eyes. "You didn't care when the first wave of death threats started. You didn't care when Hobie got dragged online for supporting you. You didn't care when my personal texts were leaked. I didn't know they were your texts. Well, now you do." The van went quiet again. Jimin's voice came from the front seat. Low. Unsteady. "You're not the only ones bleeding." The van pulled into the underground garage. Security swarmed them before the doors even opened. Flashlights. Barked orders. Cameras. They moved like ghosts through the chaos, escorted like prisoners. Back inside the dorm, Hoseok was already pacing the living room. "I can't believe someone in the company sold us out," he muttered, throwing his phone onto the table. "And they're protecting them." Still. Yoongi stood by the window, arms folded, face unreadable. Namjoon was on a call with legal. Jean had sent a voice message that played on repeat. "Don't let them divide you. That's how they win." But the cracks were already forming. The group gathered in the main room. No cameras. No managers. Just them. Just the truth. "We need to talk about the leak," Namjoon said, putting his phone down. "Now." Taehyung's eyes flicked toward Jungkook, then away. I didn't send anything, he said before anyone could accuse him. I didn't say you did, Namjoon replied carefully. You were thinking it. No, Yoongi said. But we were wondering who had access to that chat. Only 5 people had been on it: Jungkook, Jimin, Taehyung, Yoongi, and one of the stylists. We can't blame people without proof, Hoseok interjected. We need to lock it down, Jimin said. All new group chats. No personal device access for staff. Already in motion, Namjoon confirmed. But that's not the point. He looked at each of them. The point is, how much are we willing to lose to stay honest? Nobody spoke. Jungkook was the first to move. He walked to the center of the room, looked at all of them, and said, everything. I'm willing to lose everything if it means I can look in the mirror and not feel like I'm disappearing. Jimin stepped beside him. Same. Yoongi nodded. Then we protect each other. What if protecting you means I lose me? Taehyung asked, finally breaking. They all turned to him. He stepped forward, vulnerable in a way that made his voice shake. I'm happy for you. I am. But I'm scared. We've kept this machine going for a decade. We've sacrificed so much. What if this is the thing that breaks it? Jungkook stared at him for a long time. Then let it break. If it means we're finally free. Taehyung looked down. Jimin reached out, tentative. You're not alone in this. I feel like I am, Taehyung admitted. Ever since Osaka, I feel like a third wheel in a story I didn't even get to read. Yoongi approached, placing a hand on his shoulder. You're not a third wheel. You're a goddamn pillar. But even pillars need time to heal. Taehyung finally looked at Jungkook. I didn't leak it. I swear. Jungkook nodded once. I believe you. The air in the room shifted. Not clear, but calmer. Namjoon clapped his hands. All right. Everyone pack. We're going off-grid. Jimin frowned. What? A cabin. 3 hours out. No phones. No cameras. Just us. Until we figure this out. You think hiding will help? I think remembering who we are without the noise will. They arrived at the cabin before dawn. The forest was still. The air smelled of pine and possibility. Inside, it was small, wooden, intimate, too few rooms. But it was enough. They stayed for a week. The first 2 days were quiet. Awkward. Full of passive glances and long silences. On the 3rd day, the fighting started again. On the 4th, the truth finally poured out. Fears. Jealousies. Longing. Taehyung admitted he'd felt like a ghost in his own group since the confession. Jimin cried for the first time in front of everyone, saying he hated that his happiness hurt anyone. Jungkook said he'd spent so many years being everyone's rock that he never learned how to fall apart without guilt. Yoongi confessed that he'd almost left 2 years ago because the weight of pretending was killing him. Namjoon said nothing, just listened, shoulders heavy, eyes always scanning, always calculating, always caring more than he let on. By the end of the week, something had shifted. Not everything was healed. Not every word forgiven. But they had looked into the abyss and didn't fall. When they returned to Seoul, the storm was still raging. But they were no longer alone in it. They were no longer pretending. And sometimes, that's the bravest act of all. Even if the curtain is soaked in blood. Even if the lights burn too hot. They chose to stand together. Not as products, but as people. And they knew this was only the beginning. The morning soul returned to them was not gentle, not warm, not forgiving. News headlines were worse than before. The chaos hadn't subsided during their week in the forest, it had metastasized. Online forums burned with speculation. Corporate partners began to freeze campaigns. Advertisers pulled out. Journalists camped outside the dorm building. Dispatch released an edited voice memo, conveniently cut to make it seem like Jungkook had threatened to leave BTS if his relationship with Jimin was censored. It was a lie, but it was enough. The narrative wasn't theirs anymore. Jungkook stared at the screen of his phone as the quote spread like wildfire. If they silence me, I walk. Period. He hadn't said it like that. Not with that malice. Not as an ultimatum. But no one cared about context. People wanted spectacle. Blood. Villains. Jimin sat in the living room, scrolling through his own mentions. Every few seconds, his thumb hesitated. Every few minutes, he physically recoiled from a comment. He said nothing, but his hands were trembling again. Namjoon stood by the kitchen window, arms crossed, staring at nothing. Jungkook said finally, voice too calm, too steady for the volcano brewing underneath. What happens if I go on live and tell the truth? Namjoon turned slowly, eyes sharp. You get destroyed. I already am. You destroy us, too, Hoseok added from the hallway. Yoongi walked in, holding a laptop. They released a second clip. Everyone tensed. Yoongi sat, opened the screen, and hit play. The clip was grainy, taken from inside a dressing room. A conversation between Taehyung and an unidentified staff member, timestamped 3 weeks ago. Taehyung's voice was calm, but distant. He's in love with Jimin. You know it. I know it. Everyone knows it. But if they go public now, they'll set the whole damn fandom on fire. The video ended. It wasn't damning on its own. It was rational, honest. But out of context, and paired with the ongoing rumors, it painted him as the traitor. The saboteur. Taehyung said nothing, just lowered his head and pressed his hands to his eyes. I'm done, he whispered. I didn't even know they were recording. Doesn't matter, Yoongi said quietly. They'll twist it. Jungkook looked at him. Did you say anything else? No, Taehyung said. But I shouldn't have said that much. Jimin stood up, pacing now, palms on his head. They're dismantling us piece by piece. Correction, Yoongi said. They're making us dismantle ourselves. The room fell into an uneasy silence. Then, Namjoon finally spoke. We need to go live. Everyone turned toward him. What? Jimin asked. They'll shut us down before we get a sentence in. Then we do it unannounced. No press. No warning. Just us. No staff. No filters. We're not allowed, Hoseok said cautiously. You know that. Let them try to stop us, Namjoon said. They wanted to play with fire. Let's burn the house down. That night, they sat in the studio. All 7 of them. The room wasn't fancy. It wasn't curated. It was dark, stripped of makeup and handlers, stripped of lighting and staging. Just rawness. Just them. Jungkook turned on the live. Within 30 seconds, hundreds of thousands tuned in. Within 2 minutes, it crossed 1 million. They didn't smile. Didn't greet the fans like usual. Namjoon spoke first. This isn't a comeback teaser. This isn't a concept drop. This is us. He looked at each member, then continued. For the past month, a lot has been said about us. Some true. Some twisted. Some deliberately designed to hurt. We were told to stay silent. To let others speak for us. But we've built this relationship with you, our fans, our family, on honesty. On trust. And we're not letting that be rewritten without a fight. Jimin took over next. His voice shook slightly but grew stronger with every word. Yes, the photos were real. Yes, the rooftop moment was real. Yes, I love him. I've loved him for a long time. And no, I won't apologize for that. The chat exploded. He looked into the camera, eyes shining. I've lived too long pretending parts of myself weren't worth showing. I'm done pretending. Jungkook spoke next. No notes. No filter. I was told this would ruin everything. But what's the point of building everything if I'm not allowed to live in it honestly? If me being in love with someone who's been by my side through my darkest nights, is a scandal, then I'll wear it like a damn medal. Then silence. Taehyung leaned forward. I didn't leak anything, he said. But I let my fear speak louder than my loyalty. And for that, I'm sorry. To Jungkook. To Jimin. And to all of you. Yoongi, Hoseok, and Jeon all spoke, each with their own truth. Each with their own apology. Each with their own declaration of unity. It wasn't perfect. But it was real. And when they ended the live, the room was quiet. Heavy. Jungkook leaned back in his chair. Well, that's it. We just blew up our own world, Jimin whispered. Yeah, Namjoon said, nodding. But maybe now we can finally start building the right one. Backstage at Music Bank the next week, the staff treated them like ghosts. Not rude. Just careful. No one brought up the live stream. No one mentioned the headlines. They were slated to perform a new song, an unreleased track titled No Permission Needed. A direct challenge. A revolution wrapped in melody. The show's producers had warned them. Play it safe. They didn't. They walked onto that stage like a reckoning. The song hit like a tidal wave. And in the final verse, as Jungkook sang the words, "I won't ask the world to let me breathe," he turned toward Jimin, eyes locked, and they took each other's hands. The audience roared. Some screamed in rage. Some in joy. Some in shock. But everyone felt it. The broadcast trended instantly. Across languages. Across continents. Hashtag no permission needed. Hashtag let them breathe. Hashtag BTS unfiltered. It was not clean. It was not comfortable. But it was alive. That night, HYBE released a statement. Sanitized. Corporate. Cold. But buried near the bottom, for the first time, were 5 words no one expected. We support the members' honesty. The walls had cracked. And the world watched them fall. They didn't sleep that night. Jimin and Jungkook stayed up in the studio, playing old songs. Talking about nothing. About everything. What if it all collapses anyway? Jimin whispered, head resting against Jungkook's shoulder. Then at least it's our collapse, Jungkook said. Not one they choreographed for us. Jimin closed his eyes. Promise me one thing. Anything. No matter what happens, don't disappear on me again. Jungkook wrapped his fingers around Jimin's. I'm not going anywhere. And in the quiet, before dawn, surrounded by guitars and cables and discarded lyric sheets, they held on to that promise like it was the only thing keeping the world from ending. Because maybe it was. The silence in the HYB boardroom wasn't just tense, it was dangerous. A single screen displayed a paused video feed from the previous night's Music Bank performance. Jungkook and Jimin, hand in hand, illuminated by thousands of stage lights and millions of eyes. Below the image, red bullet points crawled across the screen like accusations, brand risk, shareholder reaction, sponsorship backlash, global split in fanbase. No one in the room dared to look at the members sitting before them. Taehyung, Namjoon, Hoseok, Yoongi, and Jungkook sat with their backs straight, eyes forward. Jeon was still away on military service, but his silence from the sidelines had spoken volumes. Jimin was absent. Not by choice, but by necessity. He was in the hospital. Panic attack. Severe. He'd collapsed in the dorm hallway that morning after waking up to photoshopped images of his own suicide plastered across his fan cafe. Messages of death wishes disguised as concern. Slurs hidden behind broken Hangul. Edits that superimposed his crying face onto funeral altars. Jungkook hadn't left his side at the emergency room until Namjoon had all but forced him to come to the meeting. Now he sat with his leg bouncing uncontrollably, fists clenched, eyes like broken glass. Mr. Han, the same executive who had so calmly threatened their contracts 2 weeks ago, leaned forward and turned off the projector. The room dimmed. His fingers tapped the desk once. Then again. And then he spoke. Do you understand what you've done? No one responded. He nodded to himself as if expecting the silence. We're in crisis mode. I don't use that word lightly. Major sponsors have withdrawn. 2 international campaigns canceled overnight. Your names are being stripped from press kits. Jungkook, you've lost a brand deal with one of the biggest luxury houses in the world. I don't care, Jungkook said flatly. Maybe you should. I care that Jimin can't breathe without seeing a new death threat. I care that his mother called me crying. I care that you're still talking about deals while someone is hooked to a hospital monitor because the world decided love was a headline. You're emotional. No, Jungkook said, voice low. I'm awake. Han turned to Namjoon. Do you support this outburst? Namjoon gave a tired smile. It's not an outburst. It's a reality check. Yoongi finally leaned forward, voice as sharp as ever. You built a billion-dollar brand on us. On our faces, our souls, our pain, our effort. You made us lie. You trained us to be perfect. Now, we're telling the truth and you act like we've committed treason. Han didn't flinch. We signed contracts. There are expectations. So rewrite them, said Taehyung suddenly, eyes narrowed. Or tear them up. But stop acting like you own us. Han looked at Hoseok next, perhaps searching for a voice of moderation. But Hoseok was looking down, shaking his head slowly. Did it ever occur to any of you, Hoseok said softly, that maybe we're not afraid of the collapse? Maybe we're tired of holding something up that was never designed to support the weight of our truth. Let's not romanticize rebellion, Han replied. You're artists, not revolutionaries. No, Namjoon said, rising to his feet. We're human beings. And we're done performing compliance. Han stood too, exasperated. Do you even know how much is at stake? Jungkook rose. Taller. Fiercer. Do you? Back at the hospital, Jimin stared at the 4 in his arm as if it didn't belong to him. The nurse had dimmed the lights after Jungkook left. The room smelled like antiseptic and despair. On the table beside the bed, his phone lay face down, buzzing occasionally, each vibration a fresh wave of dread. He didn't want to look. He didn't want to know. A soft knock at the door made him tense. His heart spiked, expecting a manager, or worse, a paparazzi breach. But when the door opened, it was Taehyung. He stepped in slowly, holding a plastic bag and a coffee cup. I brought rice balls. And sweet milk. The kind you like. Jimin blinked. You walked into a hospital with snacks? I bribed the receptionist. Jimin tried to laugh, but it caught in his throat. Are we really here now? I guess we are. Taehyung sat at the edge of the bed. He was quiet for a while, then said, I never meant to become your enemy. You didn't. But I hurt you. You were scared. So was I. Taehyung looked at him then, eyes soft and wet. You love him. Jimin nodded. It's not going away, Taehyung said. I don't want it to. Silence again. I miss us, Jimin whispered. All of us. We're still here, Taehyung replied. Just Messier. Jimin looked at him. Do you think we've ruined it? I think we've finally told the truth, Taehyung said. And the truth always ruins something first before it frees you. Meanwhile, Jungkook stood outside the building's rooftop, leaning against the railing with his phone in his hand. He could see the city stretching infinitely beneath him, glittering and cruel. He called his brother. He needed to hear something real. The phone rang 3 times before being picked up. Jungkook, his brother answered, cautious. I'm sorry if this brings shame to our name, Jungkook said quietly. There was a pause. Then his brother's voice came steady. You haven't shamed us. You've only scared us. We're afraid for you. For your safety. For your heart. But not because you love a man. Jungkook closed his eyes, throat tight. We're proud of you, his brother said. Just come home soon. Even if just to rest. That night, the group gathered in the dorm again. Not for a meeting. Not for strategy. Just to be. Jimin had been discharged earlier and was now curled up in a hoodie on the couch, legs tucked under himself, sipping the milk Taehyung had brought. Jungkook sat beside him, their knees touching. Yoongi was going through press drafts, deleting all the articles he had bookmarked over the past month. Namjoon was typing on a laptop, drafting an open letter to the fandom. Hoseok was listening to demo tracks through one earbud, head bobbing slightly. Taehyung scrolled through hate comments and, for the first time, wasn't fazed. He blocked them one by one, methodically. You know, he said finally, we've lost a lot. Yeah, Namjoon replied, eyes on his screen. But I think we're gaining something back too. Jimin looked up. What? Ourselves. No one spoke. They didn't need to. Jungkook stood and walked to the center of the room. I want to release a song, he said. No promo. No teaser. Just a drop. Which one? Yoongi asked. Permission to Breathe, Jungkook said. The one we wrote in Jeju. Namjoon looked at the others. Tonight? Jungkook nodded. Yoongi smiled for the first time in days. Let's burn the clock down. They uploaded the track at 3:08 a.m. No warning. Just a SoundCloud link and a tweet. You're not alone. JK. The song was raw. Acoustic. Unpolished. Jungkook's voice trembled. Jimin's harmonies cracked. But the lyrics shattered. I held my breath so long I forgot how it felt to breathe. And when I opened my mouth, they called it rebellion. But it was just survival. Let me breathe. Let me be. The track spread faster than they expected, trending globally within an hour. Fan messages flooded in. Thousands of them. I came out because of you. I cried listening to this. You reminded me I matter. They sat in the living room, watching the wave grow. They didn't speak. But they were smiling. Through the fire. Through the backlash. Through the wounds that still bled. They had survived the knife in the room. And now they were building something no storm could dismantle. Freedom. The morning came with no mercy. No forgiveness. Just the sound of Jungkook's phone vibrating against the glass coffee table again and again, relentless, like a warning. He didn't move. He was curled on the living room floor, blanket half off his shoulder, shirt damp with sweat. He hadn't really slept. He just shut his eyes until exhaustion forced him still. Jimin stood in the kitchen, staring at the kettle as it boiled. He hadn't spoken a word since checking his messages at dawn. Are we trending again? Jungkook asked from the floor, his voice hoarse. Jimin didn't answer. I'll take that as a yes. The kettle whined. Jimin poured 2 mugs of tea. He didn't ask if Jungkook wanted one. He just brought it over, set it beside him, and sat on the floor too. I think they want me gone, Jimin finally said. Not just from the group. From the industry. Jungkook looked at him. They want both of us gone. Yeah, but they hate me more. No, Jungkook said. They hate what we represent. The silence stretched. Across the room, Namjoon walked in from the hallway with bloodshot eyes and an unreadable expression. He had his phone in one hand and a printed paper in the other. He dropped the paper on the table between them. It was an internal memo from HYB Legal. Subject, contractual review and termination options. Member Jimin, member Jungkook. The language was cold, clinical, brutal in its precision. Under risk assessment, Jimin's name appeared more than a dozen times. Descriptors: polarizing, potential long-term brand liability, social volatility, loss of international fan-base trust. Under Jungkook's, unstable emotional output, decline in brand compliance, public loyalty override. It wasn't just a warning. It was groundwork. A soft threat wrapped in boardroom language. They haven't made a decision yet, Namjoon said. But this means they're preparing. Jungkook picked up the paper slowly, reading it again as if it might change if he blinked enough. They think I'm dangerous. You are, Yoongi said, entering from the balcony. Because you finally stopped obeying. We didn't break the system, Jimin said. We just told the truth. Yoongi lit a cigarette, inhaled, then looked directly at Jimin. You did what they were always afraid you would. You lived without asking permission. And now they don't know how to box you anymore. So, what do we do? Hoseok asked as he entered the room, tossing a half-eaten protein bar onto the table. Wait to be erased? Put out another song? Do another live until someone else starts bleeding again? No, Namjoon said. We escalate. Jungkook raised an eyebrow. To what? Exposure, Namjoon replied. The full story. The manipulation. The silencing. The way they handled the leak. Everything. They'll sue us into the ground, Jimin whispered. They can try, Yoongi said. But if we go public first, they'll look like cowards chasing shadows. Taehyung walked in last. He was barefoot, hair unbrushed, voice raspy. I have a name. Everyone looked up. Taehyung stood still, gaze fixed on the memo. I have a name, he said again. The person who leaked the voice memo. The one who's been feeding dispatch. Silence cracked like a gunshot. Who? Jungkook asked. Taehyung swallowed. Manager Choi. The room turned to ice. No, Namjoon said slowly. That doesn't make sense. He's been with us for years, Hoseok added. He's also the only one with access to the chat history, rehearsal footage, private schedules. He was the one who recommended the Osaka set list change. He's been feeding them for months. I saw the transfer records. Jungkook stood. How long have you known? Since yesterday, Taehyung admitted. I needed to be sure. Yoongi dropped his cigarette into a mug of water. We go public. Now. But how? Jimin asked. We can't just start a witch hunt. No, Namjoon said. We make a documentary. Everyone stared at him. A what? Jungkook asked. We've been recording everything. Every session. Every rehearsal. Every private studio jam. Every late night talk. We put it all together. Our side. Our voice. We drop it in parts. No company filter. No edits. Just us. That'll break the contract, Jimin said. It'll also make us impossible to silence. We'll be blacklisted. We'll be legendary. Yoongi nodded. I'll edit it. We'll blur faces. Keep it about us. We title it The Curtain Drops, Taehyung said. Dramatic, Hoseok muttered. Accurate, Yoongi replied. They worked for 7 days straight. No distractions. No appearances. No lies. The studio was filled with tangled cables, time-stamped hard drives, and cups of untouched coffee. Old footage was resurrected, laughing fits in dressing rooms, whispered confessions in stairwells, breakdowns behind curtains. Honest, unpolished, unapproved moments. Jungkook's rooftop cry. Jimin's panic attack. Taehyung's confrontation with Choi in the hallway, secretly filmed. Namjoon's monologues. Yoongi's midnight audio rants. Hoseok's tears. Jin's military letter to the group, in his own handwriting, scanned and read by Namjoon. Each scene hit harder than the last. It was more than a story. It was a war cry. The drop was sudden. YouTube premiere. No marketing. Just the caption. Episode 1. Everything you were never meant to see. Duration. 19 minutes and 42 seconds. Upload time. 1:42 a.m. Within 10 minutes, the views passed 1 million. At 5 minutes in, the footage of Jimin on the floor, struggling to breathe, played in stark silence. Jungkook's voice whispered off-screen, "Please, baby, stay with me." At 10 minutes in, Yoongi's voice read, "This industry will love you until you stop pretending. Then they'll ask you to disappear." At 15 minutes in, the full Osaka rehearsal was shown, raw audio of the members arguing, crying, healing. At 19 minutes, the screen faded to black. White text appeared. This is just the beginning. HYBE went silent. Publicly, there was no response. Internally, the building was burning. Staff resigned. Manager Choi disappeared. Legal teams scrambled. But they were too slow. Because by 8 a.m., the video had passed 9 million views. Subtitles had been added in 21 languages by fans. International news began reporting on the BTS expose. K-pop journalists were calling it the most disruptive moment in the genre's history. And in the heart of Seoul, in a small apartment filled with empty ramen cups and exhausted voices, the 7 of them sat together again. Not as idols. Not as products. But as brothers. Jimin laid his head on Jungkook's shoulder. Taehyung pressed his fingers to his temples, smiling faintly. Yoongi leaned back and lit another cigarette. Namjoon sipped cold coffee and watched the view count rise. Hoseok scrolled through the reactions and didn't even flinch. "We did it," Jungkook whispered. "Not yet," Namjoon replied. "We're just getting started." And in the silence that followed, not even the fire behind the curtain could drown out the sound of a truth that refused to be buried. They hadn't just survived. They had reclaimed themselves. And there was no going back. The city of Seoul was silent that morning in the way a city is only ever silent before a war breaks out. The calm was not real. It was the breath the sky takes before it screams. Somewhere above the skyline, above the offices, behind boardroom windows with mirrored glass and executives that had built empires out of loyalty and image, a storm was gathering. But inside one modest apartment, in the heart of the most watched boy band in the world, no one was running. No one was flinching anymore. The final episode of The Curtain Drops was set to release in 12 hours. But the aftershocks of episode 1 were still being felt everywhere. International media had latched onto the series like starving dogs on raw meat. News anchors debated whether BTS had destroyed their legacy or redefined it. Magazine covers no longer carried glossy photos, but pixelated screenshots of Jungkook crying. Online forums were either mourning the death of Bangtan or defending them with religious fervor. Industry veterans were calling it career suicide. Meanwhile, teenagers across continents were getting tattoos of their lyrics for the first time in years. Because this was no longer about music. It was about rebellion, love, ownership, survival. Jimin stood in front of the bathroom mirror, staring at himself. He'd slept 3 hours. Maybe less. His face was pale and his hands trembled when he tried to squeeze toothpaste onto the brush. From behind him, Jungkook appeared in the doorway, his voice soft and thick with sleep. "You okay?" Jimin nodded but didn't answer. Jungkook walked in, rested his forehead lightly against the back of Jimin's neck, and let out a long sigh. "They're going to try to shut us down today. I know. They're scared. They should be." Jimin turned around, finally meeting Jungkook's eyes in the mirror. "I never thought love would feel like this." Jungkook brushed a piece of hair from his cheek. "Like what?" "Like war." Jungkook smiled, but there was no humor in it. "It was always war. We just didn't know we were soldiers." They stood there in silence, two boys turned weapons by fame, by devotion, by a system that loved them more when they kept quiet. Later that morning, the group met in the living room. The energy was different now, not nervous, not anxious. Focused. Solid. Yoongi held the hard drive in his hand like it was a bomb. "It might as well have been. This is it," he said. "Everything we've been hiding. Everything they told us not to say." Namjoon leaned forward on his knees, scanning the screen of his phone as live notifications from staff, managers, and executives rolled in nonstop. HYB Legal just issued a final cease and desist. "They say if we publish this, we're breaching our moral clause." Jungkook tilted his head. "What moral clause?" "The one that says we owe them our silence." Taehyung laughed from the kitchen. "That expired the day they sold our privacy to Dispatch." Hoseok leaned against the back of the couch, arms crossed. "Once we hit upload, we can't take it back." Yoongi looked around the room. "We don't need 7 yes. But if any one of us says no, I'll destroy the footage myself." There was a pause. Long. Still. Then, one by one, voices broke the silence. "Yes," said Jimin. "Yes," said Jungkook. "Yes," said Namjoon. "Yes," said Taehyung. "Yes," said Hoseok. Yoongi looked at them. "Then we wait for Jean." It took 15 minutes. A video call came through from the base. Jean appeared on screen in uniform, face stoic. "I saw episode 1, he said. "I saw what they did to you." None of them spoke. "I also saw how many people needed to see it." Jimin's eyes were already filling. "You've done what I never dared to do. You told the truth." Jean looked directly at Jungkook. "You have my blessing." Yoongi stood and walked to the computer. He inserted the hard drive. Dragged the file. Final episode title: The Day the Masks Fell. Runtime: 31 minutes and 7 seconds. He hovered over the upload button. Jungkook placed his hand over Yoongi's. Together. Click. The countdown began. They all watched the upload bar slowly fill, second by second. It felt both like an execution and a liberation. When the bar hit 100%, the 7 of them stood in silence. No speeches. No celebration. They just waited. And the world responded. Within the first hour, the video surpassed 5 million views. Within 3 hours, their label released a statement. Effective immediately, BTS is no longer affiliated with HYB. 10 years. Torn in a single line of cold legalese. But none of them flinched. Because the video had hit harder than any court ruling. The episode opened with raw footage from the dressing room, moments after Jimin collapsed. It cut to Jungkook's voicemail from his mother. "They might hate you, but you don't need to hate yourself." Then a montage footage never meant to be seen. A boardroom meeting where a PR rep said, "We can't market gay in Korea. Especially not with idols." A hidden mic capturing Choi's voice saying, "Let them fall. We'll still sell the name." A snippet from a tour meeting where a stylist was overheard saying, "They're not people, they're content." Then it shifted. Clips of them laughing, crying, writing, falling asleep in recording booths, reading fan letters aloud to each other, dancing in hotel rooms, hugging before each show, screaming backstage, holding hands in the dark. And finally, the last shot. Jimin and Jungkook, seated side by side, staring into the camera. Jimin speaking first. "You made us stars, yes. But we were always human. You just refused to look close enough." Then Jungkook. "We're not ending anything. We're just removing the script." The video ended with no music. Just black. And white words. "We love you. Thank you for letting us finally love ourselves." By midnight, Armies of fans marched online, in streets, in silence, and in song. Protests broke out in front of HYB. Hashtag FreeBangtan and hashtag Let Them Speak trended for 24 straight hours in 61 countries. That night, Jungkook stood on the rooftop of the apartment, looking down at the river. Jimin joined him minutes later, wrapping a blanket around both of them. "It's over," Jungkook said. "No," Jimin corrected, holding his hand. "It's just begun." Behind them, inside the apartment, the others were asleep. Or pretending to be. But the silence now was different. It wasn't fearful. It was peace. Tomorrow, lawsuits would come. Maybe blacklists. Maybe bankruptcy. But tonight? Tonight, they had nothing to hide. Nothing left to betray. No more masks. And in the space where silence used to live, the truth sang louder than it ever had before. Free,